In this evening's forum to meet the candidates for Hampshire County Sheriff. Northampton Leagues of Women Voters, together with the Daily Hampshire Gazette. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation of citizens in local, state, and national government. We never support or oppose candidates or political parties, but we have a long tradition of providing nonpartisan information through events such as tonight's forum. Northampton Open Media and Amherst Media are cooperating in transmitting and recording this event. It's being streamed live at the Northampton Open Media website, and the recording will be available on their YouTube channel. Both leagues will provide a link to the recording when it becomes available. My name is Campbell. I'm a resident of Leverett in Franklin County and a member of the Amherst League of Women Voters. I will be moderating tonight's forum. Tonight, we welcome 3 candidates for the office of Hampshire County Sheriff. In ballot order, they are Patrick Kaling, Yvonne Gitelson, and Caitlin Sepita. The Hampshire County Sheriff's Office became an independent state agency in 1999 as a result of the abolition of the Hampshire County government. The sheriff is responsible for overseeing the Hampshire County Jail and the House of Correction on a campus of 5 buildings. Those who are arrested anywhere in Hampshire County will typically end up at the county jail until they are bailed or sentenced. Budgets for the county sheriffs must be approved by the state legislature. The Hampshire Sheriff's Office has a current budget of $15,000 and change, $15 million and change, sorry. The sheriff oversees all staff and necessary services for the incarcerated population, including physical and mental health programs, skills education, and reentry services. The Sheriff's Civil Process Division serves documents issued by the courts, such as notices of eviction and subpoenas. All 3 candidates are running as Democrats, so they will face off in the primary election on September 6th. As of today, it appears that the winner of that election will face no opposition in the November general election. Just a reminder, in Massachusetts, you can vote in the Democratic primary if you are registered as a Democrat or if you are not enrolled in any party and select the Democratic primary ballot. The last day to change your party affiliation ahead of the September 6th election is this Saturday, August 27th. At the far end of the room are the 2 panelists who will be asking questions of the candidates. Chad Kane is the new managing editor of the Hampshire Gazette. Jean Cherdek is a member of the Franklin County League of Women Voters. Jean will be asking questions submitted in advance by members of the public, as well as questions from the audience here tonight. If you have a question, please write it on an index card and hold it up for our question collector to take and pass to Jean. Thank you. All right, let's see, get to the next page here. Each candidate will be allocated 2 minutes for opening statements, 1 minute to answer each question, and a final 1 minute for a closing statement. Our timekeepers are in the front row, and they have warning signs of 15 seconds and a stop sign. Please, when the stop sign appears, candidates, please finish your sentence quickly and stop speaking. And as for the audience, so that we can get through as many questions as possible, we ask you please to hold your applause until the end. Also, please turn off the ringers on your cell phones and maintain silence so that we can hear what the candidates have to say without interruption. To begin then, these candidates will offer their opening statements. The initial order was determined by drawing straws, but as it turns out, it is also the ballot order. Mr. Kaling, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Amherst and Northampton for allowing me to speak as the sheriff. I am Patrick Kaling, and I am the sheriff of Hampshire County. I'm responsible for all the operations of the Hampshire Sheriff's Office. There are 7 divisions. It's complex work. It requires a multi-dimensional skill set, which I've developed over the past 40 years. I've been in the role of a correctional officer, a captain, major. I was the assistant superintendent and the special sheriff before I became sheriff 6 years ago. I've got 10 years of college-level teaching experience, and I'm an American Jail Association certified jail manager, the only one in this race that is. I've led the department through the worst epidemic in the past 100 years, ensuring the safety of the incarcerated, the staff, and the public at large. I've worked on ensuring our agency has met the requirements of the Criminal Justice Reform Acts of 2018. We have to gather much information and share that information via computers and database. It's a database-driven system. I've guided a process where we have opened up a triad office in the Hampshire Mall to assist with senior citizens, along with the district attorney's office and local police departments. I was one of the first departments to sign up to establish a medication-assisted treatment program in 2018 through the Commonwealth. We have become the only second in the state, our own opioid treatment center inside the facility. We're fully accredited by the American Correctional Association and the NCCHC, the National Commission on Correctional Health Care. And those happened during the pandemic also. And our Nurturing Fathers program.
Thank you. Ms. Gitelson.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I'm Yvonne Gitelson, Hampshire County resident for 30 years, proud graduate and proponent of public education, and fierce advocate for those in custody and the staff who do this very difficult work. I'm the previous education coordinator of the Hampshire Jail, and now I'm the corrections program specialist for Massachusetts. Education is the only thing proven to reduce recidivism. It saves lives and money, and it interrupts the school-to-prison pipeline. Why I'm the best choice? When this election came around, I felt I had a moral responsibility to step up and offer my candidacy because I know what goes on and I know we can do better. We need something very different in this sheriff's office. I have the right combination of direct front lines and administrative managerial experience, plus the perspective of a tightwad taxpayer who believes in civic duty and restoring integrity to public servant leadership. The sheriff's job is not an entry-level position, and frontlines experience is not enough. I have extensive administrative, managerial, supervisory, and fiscal and communication skills to do this job. I'm also the only one with significant diversity, training, and experience, which I'll bring to the HSO in both racial and ethnic diversity awareness and proficiency, and sensitivity and inclusion for all sexual orientation and gender identity communities. I'm also the only one who has spelled out the many specific initiatives I'll put in place. Check my website or my campaign card, you'll see. I'm proactive, not reactive. I'm collaborative and driven for continuous program improvement. I believe in accountability for all, regardless of title, rank, or criminal history. I have no tolerance for corruption, special privilege, or conflict of interest. I won't protect friends who cross legal or ethical lines. I have a transition team in place. We've been making plans already, and I am ready on day one. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sepita.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to the public directly. My name is Sepita. I am a registered nurse, have been for nearly 12 years, and approximately 10 of them in corrections, 9.5 at the very facility that I am looking to be elected sheriff of, and the past nearly year up at Berkshire County doing the same work. I'm the only candidate for office that continues to do the day-to-day, face-to-face work with the individuals who are incarcerated, as well as working face-to-face and shoulder-to-shoulder with the staff who are doing this work. Those are two of our primary stakeholders, along with the community that you all represent. What we are seeing by and large, more and more than anything else, are issues with substance use and mental health in our incarcerated population. This is the work I do, this is the work I'm trained for, this is what I have been spending my life working towards. Who better to helm an agency than someone who understands those issues very intimately and very thoroughly? The prongs of my approach towards this candidate are 4. There is facility modernization. We are an antiquated facility using typewriters to keep records, no longer necessary. We need to modernize and move into the 21st century. That's something that I can bring to this office. We need to address our staffing issues. The staff that I work day to day with are overworked and burdened. They need help. We need to work on our recruiting as well as our retention. We are bleeding staff at the very upper levels of experience. We need to address that. We need to expand our programming, particularly to include technical and vocational training that is modern and aimed at job placement in the market in which we are living in now, which is a modern, robust building and manufacturing market. We also need to include the community as part of our work. We need to include service as part of the work that we are doing in the Sheriff's Office. Our service programming largely shut down during COVID, and I think it is very important to bring service back into the incarcerated population and to give back to the community that supports us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first question will be presented by Jean Cherdick.
As sheriff, what would your position be on sharing information from your office with Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE?
Ms. Sepita, will you please start?
The Sheriff's Office has no responsibility to participate in any federal immigration issues involving ICE. It would be my platform and my position as Sheriff to continue that. There is no reason for ICE to be involved outside of any legal parameters.
Mr. Kaling?
Yes, if you look at my record, we have not been working with the federal immigration system the whole time I've been in the role of sheriff, and that will continue in the next administration.
And Ms. Gitelson?
Yes. If you look at any of my answers on this question, I have said unequivocally I will not cooperate. Northampton is a sanctuary city, which means we will not contain or detain any undocumented persons in our facility. Of course, if anyone breaks the law and they are brought to our facility for having committed or being charged with a misdemeanor or a felony, we will deal with them on those issues. But their immigration status has no role in the Hampshire Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. The next question will come from Mr. Kane.
So last spring, the ACLU of Massachusetts released a poll with the following findings. Only 17% of voters can name their county sheriff. 41% said they didn't know that sheriffs were elected. And less than 1/3 believe that a sheriff makes a major impact on the state's criminal justice system. As sheriff, what role do you see yourself playing to increase awareness about what happens at the jail and for the important work that this position does? And how would you go about raising this awareness in the community?
Let's see. Ms. Sepita, would you start again, please?
Sure. In terms of raising awareness, I think the most important part is making ourselves visible and accessible to the community. We need to be vocal and visible in what it is we do and educating the public on what the role is. I think the vast majority of the public has issue knowing who the sheriff is or what the sheriff does because we assume that no news is good news. I argue that no news is no news. If you don't hear anything out of our office, you have no idea what it is we're doing for your community, what we're doing for the incarcerated population, what we're doing for the staff. You don't know. It's our responsibility to educate the community. How do we do that? We do that with a website update. That website hasn't been touched in the better part of 10 years. Make it visible. What are we doing? How are we doing it? For the community, for the families of incarcerated individuals. We've had a wonderful summer of parades, festivals, everything under the sun in Hampshire County. There are info booths at all of these. Why do we not have officers, treatment staff, nurses at any of them offering information to the public about what it is we do, and then offering information as well to the public that are looking to be involved with the criminal justice system? You'd like a job here? Let's help you with that.
Thank you. Ms. Gitelson?
Yes. If you'll notice, my campaign platform is based on transparency, accountability, and community. Transparency is all about education. And it's very, very clear that in Hampshire County, we have not known what has been going on in this sheriff's office. And in fact, to follow up on the ACLU's statistics, in Hampshire County, the number was only 13% who could identify the sheriff or had any idea of what the sheriff's office does. So as an educator, my job is, I'm sort of born and bred to share the mission, share the idea, pull back the curtain, and I believe in transparency. I think we have a lot that we could be proud of, and I would look forward to sharing that with the community that we will reflect and respond to. Thank you.
And Mr. Kaling.
Yes, the ACLU's study of the sheriffs, there were roughly 31 people who were interviewed in Hampshire County. So there were 31 people who did not know who the sheriff was. I would suggest to you that part of that is we try to treat everybody that we come in contact with dignity and respect. And that is part of the role of the sheriff. And it's part of the role of the staff that we work with the inmate population. We work with outside people in many different roles, whether it's in the community, through our Bridge to the Future House, whether it's in the court system, through drug court. All of those people that are in that system need dignity and respect, and that's how we get the job done. And it's not about raising a flag and waving that we're the sheriff and we're the sheriff's office. Thank you.
I'd like just let me remind the audience that if you'd like to ask a follow-up question, you can write that one on an index card and pass it to our collector, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of this forum. Please remember that all questions need to be directed to all three candidates. So the next question will come from Jean.
What services are currently available to those awaiting trial and sentenced jail residents that specifically serve the needs of those with chronic major mental illness and/or alcohol or drug addiction, and how can they be improved?
Mr. Kaling?
There's always room for improvement in anything that we do, but we do have substance abuse treatment, we do have mental health treatment, and we do have ongoing services. The MOUD program was established so that anyone coming into the facility, whether it's pretrial or sentenced or even to the regional police lockup, they can access those services as soon as they come in, and we get them the appropriate treatment that they need in the appropriate time frame. There's an evaluation done as soon as they come in for mental health issues and for substance abuse treatment. So those two areas starts as soon as they come into the facility.
Ms. Sepita?
Current opportunities for treatment exist with the MAT OTP, which I was on the ground floor of helping to create in terms of the program itself, the record-keeping process program I designed and created. I also updated weekly staff that were involved with that program, and it has since expanded into an opiate treatment program, which is fantastic, and I highly applaud that. In terms of our mental health treatment, we contract our services out. The facility does not have its own mental health program, nor its own state providers. We are contracted out with ServiceNet. What does that buy us? That buys us a clinician Monday through Friday, and it buys us a provider twice per month. That is not enough to deal with the more than 50% of the population with a diagnosed significant mental health issue. What we get with that contract is obligation to the contract. What we need are staff in the facility to address the issues of mental health that are significant in our population closer to around the clock instead of Monday through Friday. That's not when crises happen.
And Ms. Gitelson?
Currently, as in most county facilities around the state, approximately 70% of those in custody are on the pretrial detainee side. And they are not, by law, guaranteed access to much in the way of any services because they are detained. It's difficult because it's sometimes challenging to know when they will be called to court. and then processed. I can tell you in terms of my experience at the Hampshire County Jail, if you go through the pretrial side of the facility, you will see an awful lot of folks sleeping in through much of the afternoon, not a lot going on, very little in the way of education services, very little in the way of mental health services. It was difficult, in my experience, to get access to the clinician that Ms. Sepita just referred to. In terms of limited hours and accessibility. As far as substance abuse treatment goes, not a lot.
Thank you. Chad?
So I wanted to have you talk about something that you all agreed about in your first forum, and that's one of the major obstacles is staffing. What qualities should a sheriff look for in a corrections officer, and how would you change the hiring procedures so that you succeed in attracting and keeping employees that are better qualified and more diverse?
Ms. Gitelson, would you start, please?
Sure. That's a great question. I really like that one. I would look for a varied skill set. I would look for a varied education background. I don't think there's any one set of education preparations that would define a particular corrections officer. I think I am very interested in someone who is real clear about right and wrong, what's fair, what's not fair. I am very eager to find a diverse group of people to join the Hampshire Sheriff's Office, because currently the staffing there is not as diverse and does not reflect those in custody. I would look for someone who thinks a little bit outside the box and does not have a hard line necessarily law and order perspective, but someone who understands the mentorship role that a corrections officer can really provide.
Thank you. Mr. Kaling?
Yes. For most jobs, you have to look at what the credentials for that specific job is. So it depends on what position you're hiring for. As corrections changes, and it is changing, we are moving to the outside community. And so therefore, we need people who are diverse in what's going on in the outside community. So one of the things that we look for as we're looking at new staff who have backgrounds in social services, who have backgrounds in mental health, and it would augment those individuals who we do have on staff who actually are diverse and who are of different races and nationalities. This is not a one-size-fits-all staff, but we don't look at who the person is, we look at what they can bring to the table.
And Ms. Sepita?
As the only current day-to-day staff member on this panel, I'll speak to this a little bit more specifically. I think what we need is someone who is a team player, someone who can talk. The officers inside of those walls and the rest of the staff don't carry weapons. The only weapons they have are their voice. So we need someone who can speak to other people in a way that can engage them in order to gain compliance or to engage in treatment. For someone to be educated about something, they need to be able to talk. We need somebody who is coachable. We need somebody who has a strong work ethic and someone with a varied life experience. I think when people come from different backgrounds, it educates and it helps everyone grow. Inside of the walls of a correctional facility, you become a family pretty fast. It's a traumatic and difficult experience to work within, and I think having that strong family dynamic makes things easier for the staff involved there. It is important to find people who want to be part of a team like that.
Thank you. Jean?
Okay, I'm going to piggyback on his question a little bit here and look at the other side of this. In previous forums, it has been stated that in 5 to 10 years, confinement inside of a correctional facility will not be around and will be a more community-based version of corrections. I think you just touched on that a little bit. How will this impact the younger and newly hired officers? Will they have jobs? How will they be trained? And how will they keep their current retirement plan? How do you plan on keeping the Hampshire Sheriff's Office relevant in the years to come?
Mr. Kaling, would you like to start on that one?
Okay, sure. There's several pieces to that, obviously, but first and foremost, you hire individuals who have a diverse background, and then you do what we are doing now. We have hired a person who is a college faculty member to take over training and education, because we have to change from the format of training and make it more of an educational process for new employees as they come in. If we work with this department and with the outside community, we will get that done. And it is already starting to work. We're looking at outside diversity pieces. As a matter of fact, Trans Health Northampton is going to be starting a program in the fall to educate all staff on trans health. Those are new changes that we're starting to look at. We're trying to be ahead of the curve and not behind it.
Ms. Gitelson?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to start doing immediately is think very differently about corrections. And the dividing line between the main facility and the Office of Community Corrections and outside programs right now is really quite rigid. And oftentimes these folks don't even work together or know each other especially well. And we need to think about accessing those programs and beginning to prepare for someone to re-enter the community as soon as they come into the facility, as opposed to waiting until they are close to their release date. We do need a very different skill set among our various employees that we hire. I don't think there's ever going to be a day that corrections goes away entirely. It's just going to look different. It's going to look more like probation and parole, where someone has an electronic monitoring bracelet and they report to someone out in the community. It's just not going to look the same way that it looks right now.
Thank you. Ms. Sepita?
Part of what happened during COVID is that the population of the facility halved. We went from closer to 250 to where we are today, 126. In doing that, the profile of the individual who is incarcerated now is more violent than they were before. It is difficult to get incarcerated in this state, and those who are presently incarcerated now are repeat or violent offenders. Jails will not go away. There will be people who commit violent acts in your community that we all would like removed from your community and placed somewhere where they can be cared for safely and out of the community, where they're no longer safe to us. So corrections will continue to exist in that fashion. We see it now today. Staff assaults are up. The staff is less safe at work now than they were previously. Where we're going to be seeing corrections moving out into the community is largely before they even get to the carceral situation. They will be diverted in the courts. They will be diverted to programming outside of there. So yes, there will be opportunities for that in the community-based system of incarceration, but inside, it is still a place where we house violent people.
Thank you. Chad? Next question will come from Chad.
All right, thanks. This one's much shorter. Please describe your leadership style and how that style separates you from your two opponents in this race.
Ms. Gitelson, would you start with that, please?
Sure. I am very collaborative. This is one of the things that teachers, that educators are always taught, is how to be collaborative, how to include all kinds of folks in the conversation and in the solution. And the idea of collaboration is hand in hand with proactivity. It is beginning with the end in mind and start working backwards, planning backwards. What is the ultimate goal that you want for this student, for this employee, for this staff, for the team, for the facility? Where do you see yourself? And you have to have a very clear vision in order to get to that place. And if you don't have a clear roadmap of where you're going to get to, you are going to struggle about how to get there. So you need to have a plan, you need to have a vision, and I am very collaborative, very hands-on, and very proactive. And that's always been my leadership style.
Ms. Sepita.
I'm a nurse. We work in settings all the time where we do things as a team effort. Medicine and healthcare is a team effort. It is not just nurses, it's CNAs, it's respiratory therapists, it's all of that. Corrections is just like that. It's not just security staff, it's medical, it's treatment, it's mental health, it's education. I have a leadership style that is team-based. We should be involving all aspects of the facility. It's also a hands-on leadership style. I want to know what's going on in the day-to-day operations of my facility. I want to know what's going on with the individual staff. I should be knowing what's going on with my individual staff. I should be knowing what's going on with the incarcerated population in the facility as well. If I am not serving their needs, I am a poor leader. I should know what is happening in the walls of the facility that I am running.
And Mr. Kaling.
The next generation of correctional officers and all staff in corrections will have to be a multitasker, no matter what the situation is. And so what I started doing and working with my leadership team was rebuilding the organization from a standpoint, giving more people more responsibilities and spreading out responsibilities to the directors of part of the facility and to the captains who run the facility on a day-to-day basis. And so by spreading them out and giving them more responsibility, they are more engaged, they learn more, and they work together as a team. That team is still developing, but it's a solid team of professionals who have lots of years of experience, and they're working on all different types of situations on a daily basis. It's not just about locking inmates up, it's about treating the individuals.
Thank you. Jean?
What are the functions of the sheriff's office in addition to the jail?
Ms. Sepita, would you start, please?
In addition to the jail, there's also a civil component to the jail. There's a civil process unit, which deals with papers that are served from the court system. So subpoenas, eviction notices, divorce decrees, that type of work. Those civil process officers are also on site and present during the eviction process. There is also the Community Justice Support Center that services the needs of those who are on parole and probation and service the needs and requirements of their stipulations to those parole and probation issuances. So if someone has to go for random urine testing for drugs or anything like that, they're going to come to the Community Justice Support Center to do that, as well as programming, NA, AA, any type of other programming that is stipulated in their parole or probation adjudications or, stipulations after the court system. Those are the primary additional portions to this, as well as other small ancillary pieces. Our triad program that deals with our senior community in the county, which is beginning to expand from where it was shrunk some during COVID.
Mr. Kaling, do you have something to add?
Yes, there's also the Rocky Hill Reentry Collaborative, which was a facility that I worked with my team of leaders to design and set it up so that parole during COVID had a place to send people who did not have a home. There were people if they were being released to the street, run the risk of overdosing and dying. And I did not want to see that in this community. And so the Rocky Hill Reentry Collaborative was designed for that purpose. We can house up to 16 individuals in that facility. And then the Bridge to the Future House is our own model for getting people back with wraparound services in the community, get them a job, find them permanent housing, and those two programs work really well hand in hand in getting people into a balanced lifestyle so that they can stay out of the facility.
And Ms. Gitelson?
Yes, and we have pretty much covered all the different parts of the Hampshire Sheriff's Office. There is the main facility, there's the Office of Civil Process, there's the Office of Community Justice and Support, there's the RLU, which is the holding facility when someone is arrested in perhaps one of the smaller towns and they need to be held until they can be arraigned. There is coordination with the Office of Probation, coordination with the Office of Parole, There is, as was mentioned, triad services and the other parts that involve step down and reentry into the community. I think the question also lends itself to what else could there be? And there could be an awful lot. There could be outreach to schools in Hampshire County. I would really like to see an interruption of the school-to-prison pipeline. Most educators in Hampshire County have no idea whether or not they have a child with a parent in custody, and that's a risk factor for that child to be in custody themselves.
Thank you. The next question comes from Chad.
Okay. I believe I'm correct in saying you all spent time at the jail during the COVID period over the last 2.5 years. So I'm wondering, during that time, how would you rate the approach taken in response to the pandemic? And what have you learned about that experience that could be improved upon or done better before the next emergency?
Ms. Sepita, would you start?
The response was varied. No one knew at the beginning what we were dealing with, so we did the very best we could with the information that we had. Was it dealt with the best way it probably could have been? Hindsight 2020? No, but we know more now than we did 2.5 years ago. We did the best that we could. What could we do better going forward, and what have we not prepared with yet but should be preparing with? We need a disorder management plan. We need to deal with space allocation, resource allocation, staff allocation. In the facility, there's a series of disorder management plans that deal with any major disaster or emergency within the facility. We need one to deal with infectious disease. We have monkeypox on the horizon. We don't have a disorder management plan in place. What else could have been done? We could have seen the presence of our sheriff more frequently during the initial outbreaks of our COVID epidemic. We also could have seen a different leadership style where we put the frontline staff first and administrative staff second.
Ms. Gitelson?
Yes, I think we have certainly learned a lot since COVID. I would say that what I would do differently is I would respond faster on all fronts. I believe in science. I believe in the CDC. I would have listened to those folks when they were telling us weeks before there was response inside the Hampshire jail to lock down and stop movement and to start taking precautions that we eventually needed to take. We do need to prepare better. We need to prepare for disasters. We do know more now. We do need to not be caught behind the 8 ball as the Hampshire Sheriff's Office was. The Hampshire Sheriff's Office was not prepared for this kind of pandemic. And there was a real lack of information that was disseminated as the pandemic happened to us. We didn't know what was going on. We also didn't get the most accurate information about how many positive cases were truly in the facility. We would find out after the fact that staff members were sent home with a positive case, and we had been in contact with those folks and we had no idea.
Thank you. Mr. Kaling?
Well, some of that might have had something to do with HIPAA violations, so I won't even go there. But the reality is when you look at situations, every morning for the first couple of months of COVID, most of my team met. The people who were actually in the facility at the time met, and they discussed what needed to be done to keep everybody safe. We spent a lot of time there during that period of time. And yes, there's never a good time to be able to get all the information out at once. But we followed all the CDC guidelines. We followed the state guidelines. And we hired an epidemiologist to make sure that we were doing the right thing for everybody to keep everybody safe. And guess what? It was successful. We kept everybody safe during COVID. Some people may have gotten sick, but nobody died on my watch. And I will always be proud of that I took care of the staff and I took care of the inmates.
Thank you. Jean?
Okay. The VOTES Act just passed in the legislature, ensuring that everyone incarcerated in the jail, pre-trial, or with a misdemeanor can vote for sheriff. What are you doing to ensure eligible people can vote in the primary?
Well, I guess Mr. Kaling, please start on that.
Well, the Vote Act doesn't take place until 2023, if you check the information. It doesn't take effect until 2023. So, but beyond that, for years, we have always made sure that people who wanted to vote had the ability to vote. As a matter of fact, there were a total of 12 people in the population that asked for information and got information from our law librarian, who is the person that we have disseminate information to the individuals. And I believe of the 12, 8 of them did not even belong to Hampshire County. So there may have been 3 or 4 that were Hampshire County residents. But the reality of it is we make sure that the information is available to them, and we make sure that they can access the right to vote, and we can make sure that they can connect with a clerk in whatever town that they belong to.
Ms. Sepita?
Part of what the Votes Act does is require facilities to offer proactive approaches to voter engagement and voter education. The facility has 2 days to get people registered to vote for the primary. They are actively still seeking guidance from the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office on how to do that. We are not proactive in this. If we were proactive, we wouldn't be scrambling at the last minute. I took it upon myself to reach out to the Sheriff's Department to come in and speak with the inmate population. This is an important race for them. I was denied that access. I was also asked to follow up with the State Ethics Commission, as well as the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, for possible violations in my request. I did both of those things and was told it was absolutely perfectly fine that I could come into the facility and talk with everyone as long as we were all allowed equal access. That could have been done by the sheriff if he had wanted to, and made a platform for all of us to come in and speak with the individuals who are incarcerated there. This is an important race for them. They should be able to hear from us. They can't come to this. We should bring that to them.
Ms. Gitelson?
Yes, simply making the information available to those who might be eligible to vote is not enough. The folks who are incarcerated don't think that the political process speaks to them. They don't see themselves as active, engaged, involved citizens. And one of my teachers back in the day said, you know, as we were talking about, well, what do you do when you have reluctant students who don't want to come to class or who don't see the value in what you're teaching? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Our job is to make them thirsty. Our job is to convince them why their incarceration is inextricably tied into the political process and the criminal justice system. We have to get them involved, engaged, interested. We have to get them excited about these issues. I certainly get them excited, and as a former civics teacher, I love this stuff, so I would have forums and debates.
Thank you. Chad?
There are many programs designed to improve the lives of inmates and increase their chances of success upon release. While acknowledging these programs, please identify 1 or 2 new ones or that you would like to implement over the next 6 years if elected sheriff.
Mr. Kaling, would you start on that one too, please? Mr. Kaling?
Oh, it's my turn?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. One of the things that I would like to do is be able to establish another Bridge to the Future house somewhere in the eastern side of the county. And I think that's an important factor as we move forward to helping move people, again, back into the community where they come from or close to where they come from, so that they can get housing and jobs and wraparound services, whether it be mental health, substance abuse, or just finding a mentor or finding a substance abuse counselor that's in that, or substance use counselor in that area. All of those pieces are important to keeping people out of the facilities. I want to try to expand what we do with the drug court in Northampton, and hopefully work with the eastern side of the county as well for that purpose. The drug court, we have a clinician that works with them to keep them on track. Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Gitelson?
Yes. I would start by upgrading technology. I would bring one-to-one mental health counseling because the group model I don't think is as successful as one-to-one therapy and counseling could be. I will certainly focus on all kinds of education and vocational training opportunities. A couple of programs that I have my eye on and could easily implement. One would be a virtual CDL training and preparation program where you get a simulator and you study to be a truck driver. These are great jobs with family-sustaining wages and very, very attractive to those in custody. I also want to work with the UMass Prison Education Initiative to begin a virtual college program around the Commonwealth. The provost is right on board. We are ready to launch this as soon as I take office. And those are just the starting, but you can take a look at my card and see more.
Ms. Sepita.
Part of what we need to shift the focus of is from low-demand jobs to high-demand jobs. Part of what I would implement is work towards the building and manufacturing trades as our vocational and technical education expands. We need to start thinking about hoisting licenses and OSHA training. Both of those can happen either in person or virtually as we do technology upgrades. I second that with Ms. Gitelson. We use typewriters in the facility. We need to upgrade our technology. Start right there. As we expand those vocational and technical education programs to increase the licensures that can come out of the facility in the hands of incarcerated individuals, couple that with something in my medical background, get everybody CPR and AED certified. There's no reason why everybody in that facility can't be. Take those two things, walk into a job in the manufacturing and building trades, which offer CORI-friendly jobs upon decarceration and are imminently available in the current community and the current climate that we have in this country, and you can have an incarcerated individual or a newly decarcerated individual get that job on day one.
Thank you. Jean.
Can you briefly explain how the Criminal Justice Reform Act will affect your budget?
Ms. Gitelson, would you start with that, please?
Sure. Well, we are very well aware that the legislature, so firstly, Massachusetts is 50 out of 50 in terms of our rate of incarceration. I think we can all be pretty proud about that. We lock up the least of any other state. But what that means is, I'm echoing a point that Ms. Sepita made, what that means is if you're locked up in Massachusetts, chances are you did something pretty rough, pretty violent. And what this means in terms of the time inside or the time in custody is that even though they have committed more violent offenses, they're with us for shorter and shorter periods of time. The legislature, as our numbers decrease, as our numbers drop, the legislature wants to know, why does it still cost so much to keep a jail open? Because there's still a bottom line critical mass below which you cannot go. It still costs a certain amount of money to keep a place staffed 24/7, 365, 3 shifts running around the clock.
Thank you. Ms. Sepita.
Part of what's entailed in the Criminal Justice Reform Act is housing requirements and supervision requirements of individuals who are incarcerated. It increases the amount of time out of the cell that we are required to give them, which is a good thing for the incarcerated person. It's a difficult thing for the staff. It requires an increase in your staffing in order to monitor those people. In our facility, which is an antiquated facility and not designed in a way that modern corrections works, it is difficult to facilitate the amount of time out of a cell for people who are in some form of special management or who are in protective custody and who need that same amount of time out of the cell, but very, very separate from everyone else. That increases the staff burden. Staff burden increase equals, in a lot of cases, budget increases. Unfortunately, we haven't filled the staffing positions, so our staff just kills that budget in overtime we're still requiring. It also increases the requirements of mental health supervision and medical supervision. That's another thing with our staff as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kaling.
The Reform Act was designed through the legislature to help the incarcerated population move to a better place, because the legislature recognized that the criminal justice system and the corrections system is being used as mental health facilities and substance use disorder facilities. And that's an unfortunate factor that comes into play. Both of those factors cost a lot of money. We're in a process right now where we're looking at a $750,000 a year grant, and if we get that grant, we'll be able to do more surrounding help with both substance use and mental health, both in the facility and moving out into the community. Because if you don't have that money, you can't do the job. But it is costing a lot more money to house the individuals that we have at the present time because of what our situation is as far as mental health.
Chad.
In 2019, an attorney for Prisoners as Legal Services was quoted in the Gazette saying that for many incarcerated people, the phone is a lifeline, and the phone is especially a lifeline for their loved ones. The burden on prison families for phone use is tremendous. Currently, families pay 14 cents a minute, with a percentage of that going back to the jail, which I believe is 61%. Can you talk about the justification for this type of contract, and would you support eliminating it in favor of free phone calls?
Ms. Gitelson, will you start, please?
Sure. I am all about free phone calls, and if the legislature will not provide supplemental allocations to offset the cost of free phone calls, then at the very least, I would take a look at the budget and I would offer those calls at our facility cost to get that factor down. I don't understand the current contract and why the facility makes a percentage from that contract. I don't think we should be making money off people in custody. I think that they are there to serve their time or to await trial. And if we are really committed to the idea of reentry, one thing we need to do is make sure that custody does not cause an irreparable breach within families, which it often does. When a parent is in custody, the whole family does time. And this is a risk factor for every family member attached to the person in custody or detention.
Mr. Kaling?
Yes, a couple of points on this. They do get some free phone calls every week. We also offer Zoom visits so that they can have visits. None of that has any cost to it. The legislature was very close, and I was very supportive of it and came out in support of it, as did most of the sheriffs in Massachusetts, that if the cost can be shifted to the state budget, then we would be able to eliminate some of those services. Some of the money that costs for these services have to do with security devices that are built into the phone systems, both for the security of the staff and the safety of the staff, and for the inmates, and preventing crime from happening on the outside. So there are many different factors to it. But during COVID, we gave a lot of free phone calls, but afterwards went back to a different system because everybody agreed to the 14 cents.
Ms. Sepita?
So let's talk about what some free phone calls equals. That's 10 minutes per week per person. That doesn't seem like a lot. If you have kids on the outside, I have kids on the outside, that doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. I talk with my kids on the phone for 10 minutes, 13 times a day. I am in favor of the free phone calls, yes. Shifting the burden of phone calls outside of the family responsibility and to the state that is incarcerating them, whether we like it or not, we are, is the more responsible thing to do. Phone calls are a lifeline for families on the inside to families on the outside. We know that recidivism is reduced when we implement programs that allow incarcerated individuals to maintain and keep contact with their families and their communities. It would behoove us as administrators to implement that in our facility in a more expanded way. Yes, we have Zoom phone calls, but for a lot of people, that phone call is a lifeline to the outside and decreases the burden on the family as well in terms of transportation to the facility and gives them expanded opportunities to speak with their families when their families are convenienced by it.
Thank you. Jean?
How does the recidivism rate of Hampshire County Jail compare with other mass jails, and what programs would you support that could help with that?
Ms. Sepita, would you start with that?
Our recidivism rate is difficult to measure. When the correctional funding report came out earlier this year, it looked at trends across all of the HOCs, the houses of correction across the state, as well as the Department of Corrections, and to look at recidivism rates across the board. Part of the problem that the funding report came up with is that there is no two facilities that define recidivism in the same way. So you're comparing apples to oranges to bananas. So it's difficult to say whether ours is better, worse, comparable to anywhere else. Our recidivism rate is somewhere around 25 to 30%-ish. What programs should we be implementing? We know, as Ms. Gitelson has said, education reduces recidivism. We also know that, like I said, programs that keep individuals incarcerated in contact with their families reduces recidivism, as does robust and aggressive and early substance use treatment programming, as well as aggressive wraparound and outreach services. All of those should be implemented as robustly as possible.
Mr. Kaling?
Yes, treatment services take place with everybody that accepts treatment services. That is a key to moving people back out into the community. What we have to look at is programs like the Bridge to the Future House, where we can provide all of those wraparound services in a community setting. Because if we're going to move people back out, that's how we have to do it. And that's how you reduce the number of people that are incarcerated, and it also reduces the number of, or the rates of incarceration across any community. So we continue to look at projects like the Bridge to the Future and the Rocky Hill Reentry Collaborative as two ways to work on solidifying those individuals that are out, that will be out in the community someday. So let's get them out faster and earlier, and keep them on a good plan with wraparound services in the community.
Ms. Gitelson?
We know that education reduces recidivism. It's the only thing proven and documented to do so. Education in custody at any level reduces recidivism by 43%. When you add vocational education and training, the rate drops to 28%. When you add higher education, the rate drops to the single digits. So we know that education works. That person does have to be ready to receive the message, however. And if they are in the throes of a mental health crisis or a substance abuse disorder, then they cannot access the education that we might provide to them. So we need all of those services in place at the same time, and we need a comprehensive treatment for that individual. We also need to make sure that when they leave the Hampshire facility, that they're not just sent out the door with a list of resources and phone numbers. We need a person to go with them to their first appointment after release.
Chad?
Lack of funding has been cited as an obstacle faced by many sheriff's offices. If you had an infusion of money, where's the first place you would put it in terms of programming?
Mr. Kaling, will you start?
The first place would probably be into building a better medical center, so that we could have better space to treat individuals. But I would prefer to use money in the community and work in the community to get these centers up and operating. One of the things that I had done almost 15 years ago, we had a study that was done by the Department of Corrections, and one of the things that they wanted to do was have a Western Mass reentry center, and they spent almost $700,000 of state money in trying to do that in Hampshire County. And at the last minute, it was scrapped from the table. But that's what we have to do, because people are not staying in facilities a long period of time, and so we have to do the community services.
Ms. Sepita?
I'd put it into our mental health treatment program. We don't have a mental health department at the facility now. We contract our services. I want it in-house. I want more providers. I want licensed providers. I want more hours. I want more opportunities for therapy, whether that's group, one-on-one, talk therapy, teletherapy, whatever it is. If you give me an infusion of money, that's where I'm putting it. We have more than 50% of our population struggling with a severe mental illness disorder. We do not have enough clinicians to manage the burden. We are asking our security staff, who are trained in critical incident management, to deal with a significant portion of mental illness that is above and beyond their education, their training, and their requirements. We need more mental health staff. We need them for longer time periods. We need them for more days. We need to have more access for the individuals in our care to that service, and that service specifically.
Thank you. And Ms. Gitelson?
Yes, thank you. I would certainly put a significant infusion of money into technology upgrades, which are sorely lacking at the Hampshire County facility, as you've heard many times before. And through that infusion of resources into technology, I believe we could solve a number of other problems. I would like to look creatively at where there are instances of waste, where there are instances of duplication of services. I do agree, you've heard me speak about wanting one-to-one mental health counseling and actual real therapy, and not just a group approach to mental health services. Of course, I want to make use of the money that we already have, and you've heard me talk about grant funding that was returned. I'm concerned about grants that we don't yet have in hand. I also know that we have a very low allocation, only that above Dukes and Nantucket. I don't understand that. I think we can do a better job of asking for better resources from Boston.
Thank you. Jean?
Given that all you desire to improve programs, what kind of trade-offs will have to be made to keep within budget, or how would you increase the budget?
Ms. Sepita?
That's a heavy question. I think there's going to have to be a look at staffing. I think we have duplication of staff. I think we prioritize high-level administrative staff over the day-to-day staff. I think that's fairly common in a lot of facilities, but it is certainly common here. I think when we talk about asking for more money from the legislature, once we have already dealt with dealing with the money that we already have, the legislature needs to be presented with programming that is evidence-based and shows positive outcome measures. The legislature is not going to give two hoots about me saying, please give me more money, without being able to show them the results of the program that I am asking for money for. If I can demonstrate to them that I have implemented a program that has a success rate of whatever percent, whatever the measurement is, or reduces recidivism or reduces crime this percent, and I could show them that positive outcome and say, I would like to triple this program, and here's the positive outcome value I have already established it being, I am much more likely to get that funding.
Ms. Gitelson?
Yes. I would agree that we have a number of redundancies in positions and in functions within the Hampshire Sheriff's Office, and I think we need to look at the system and reorganize the system in a number of different ways. So we do have some duplication of efforts, and I think we could think creatively and solve some problems much more creatively than has been done in the past. I'd like to see about reducing waste throughout the system, whether that's food waste, whether that's paper waste, whether that's energy waste. I would like to see the Hampshire County Jail become fully functional through solar and wind power by 2028, if at all possible. I'd like to see us go green. I'd like to see us grow our own food. So there are a lot of different ways we can look at saving costs and doing better with the money that we've got. I'm also a grant writer, you've probably heard. That's another source of income and funding. Thank you.
Mr. Kaling.
Well, I would agree that I always thought that wind power would work really well. And when we did the study, the state said that it would not be beneficial to having a wind turbine up at 205 Rocky Hill Road. One of the things that I did was reduce the senior staff as they retired. I took that funding and I moved that down and gave more people more opportunity and help bring people up instead of replacing some of the top administrators. So there's a balance that you have to do in all of this when you're running an organization. One of the things that we also do is we utilize our treatment staff to assist with outside eviction situations because we know that there's a lot of mental health in the community. And so those are the types of things that you have to be creative when you're doing this job where the budgets are tight.
Thank you. Next question from Chad.
So this one's a little different, but I wanted to ask it. With less than 2 weeks before primary day, can each of you characterize the tenor of this campaign? Is this a campaign with typical bickering, or is it something more?
Ms. Gitelson.
Sure. So we've learned a lot in this campaign. We've learned that at the outset we didn't know a whole lot about the role of the sheriff. We didn't know a lot about the Hampshire Sheriff's Office and what was possible. And we have also learned that bringing about information about what has gone on in the Hampshire Sheriff's Office has been perceived as very provocative and very inciting of some very strong feelings. I have to say one thing that was a very pleasant surprise is to realize how much I have in common with Ms. Sepita. We agree on about 80%, I think, of our program. The only thing we might disagree on is about who should be in the top spot. I have to say, I would welcome Ms. Sepita on my team. I think she'd be an amazing medical director or director of treatment services. And so I would look forward to that collaboration. That's what I've learned.
Mr. Kaling.
Well, I would have to say that my opponents have conducted a campaign of misinformation about the conditions at the facility and about me as the sheriff and about me personally. They have not shared 100% of what their records are. I have had my 40 years of records out there, and especially the last 6 years, pure transparency. There has not been 100% transparency on behalf of my opponents during this election as to what their history is and what their work history, whether it be at the Hampshire Sheriff's Office or previous.
Let me stop you right there, Sheriff Kaling. You're treading into some very difficult territory.
Ms. Gitelson, please, Mr. Kaling, please continue.
May I respond?
Could I have that time back, please?
Yes. Well, the timer's up to the timers. Please go ahead.
Okay. They've asked for transparency from me. I've been transparent from day one, and they have not been 100% transparent on the other side. So I would just say that.
Ms. Sepita.
I think this campaign has been broken up into two very distinct pieces, and I will speak for myself in this. I have tried very hard to run a positive, program-specific, plan-specific campaign. I've tried to be very forthright about what it is I plan on doing in this office, what my visions and my goals are. It has been disappointing in the last couple of weeks, and particularly since the Gazette article came out this past Tuesday about the issues with staff intimidation from upper-level administrative staff in the Kaling administration, the tenor of this campaign has changed markedly. This is ugly, this is dirty, this is the politics that we hear about. Do not run for office. I'm doing this because I want to see a change, because a change needs to be brought to this office. You saw that all laid out very, very clearly in Tuesday's article, very clearly. Do not run for office. This is disgusting.
May I respond?
No, we don't have an opportunity for response. You do get a closing statement if you wish to work your remarks into that. Jean?
What is the retention rate for deputies, and how would you describe their morale?
Mr. Kaling, would you start with that?
Across the board, there's roughly a 7% rate every year that you have to plan for in loss of staff, whether it's through retirements, through hiring at other agencies. One of the difficulties right now is every time the state police run an academy, and they're running back-to-back academies right now, we lose 2 or 3 people because the state police pay more, they can make a lot more money on road details and those types of situations. So that's part of a problem that we see with correctional officers, because they want to be police officers. They're young enough, they're active enough. So it becomes difficult in examining how to best bring that around. But it's roughly a 7% rate is what we're seeing across the board.
Ms. Gitelson?
Yes, we have heard that retention is a problem at the Hampshire Sheriff's Office. We have heard that veteran staff have been leaving. We've heard that new staff have left. We have heard that word has gone out that it is not a good place to work. And job one for me is going to be making the Hampshire Sheriff's Office a place that people want to apply to, and people want to stay, and people want to grow a career. But people want to be seen. They want to be heard, they want to have their opinions valued and taken into consideration, and that has not been the culture there. So the rate of retention has not been high. And when our veteran staff and trained staff take positions in other police departments or other correctional facilities, that is very, very costly to all of us. We all bear that cost because they take that training, they take their qualifications, they take their energy and their goodwill and they bring it somewhere else. We need to bring it back home and keep it where it belongs.
Ms. Sepita?
Morale is low and retention is low for a number of reasons, and I've touched on these in a lot of my campaign plans if you go on my website and read about that. A lot of it has to do with the staff feeling unheard, the staff feeling intimidated, the staff feeling unsupported in their jobs. It is difficult to come to work every day not knowing if you're going to get held for overtime that day, for the second, third, fourth time that week. You don't know coming to work if you're going to have enough, academy-trained staff to be able to work in all of the areas if you're the shift supervisor making the roster. That's a difficult thing coming into. It is hard to retain staff in the face of that. Add on top of that what we've been dealing with for COVID for the last 2.5 years and the enormous expectations that we have placed on our staff, security and otherwise, in order to keep everyone healthy and safe. They do not feel thanked. They do not feel supported. That's what they need to start feeling.
Thank you. Chad?
Have you knocked on the doors of the neighbors to the jail and asked how the jail can be a better neighbor? If so, what did you learn? And if not, why not?
Ms. Gitelson?
Sure. I have. It's very interesting that that question has come up. It's a great question. So among the neighbors on Burt's Pit Road, they're very concerned about ambient light from the Hampshire Sheriff's facility, and we need to take a look at that because we know that excessive ambient light disrupts people's sleep. It disrupts nature. It's not a good thing. What can we do to reduce that? What can we do to be more energy efficient? What can we do to be a better neighbor? I think it's not difficult to be a better neighbor. I know that on the Burt's Pit Road side, I know that traffic is not typically an issue for the jail, but I know that on the Route 66 side, it may be. There are probably people racing to get to work sometimes, and that's probably something that we need to take a look at as well. There are many things we can do to be a better community partner, not just in the immediate area right around the jail, but throughout Hampshire County.
Thank you. Ms. Sepita.
I have knocked on the doors of neighbors. I've done a lot of canvassing. Some of you might have seen me out there. But yes, I have knocked on people's doors. For a lot of them, they prefer not to think about the fact that they live next to a jail and House of Corrections. It tends to be something that they don't focus on. The facility is largely centered on a larger piece of land, so the back part of the land, you can't necessarily see the jail from across the road. So out of sight, out of mind, is a lot of what I'm hearing. I did hear a lot of the similar issues that Ms. Gitelson spoke about ambient light with the floodlights that surround the outer perimeter of the facility. Certainly, we could look into shifting maybe the focus to LED lighting or down lighting as opposed to lighting that scatters more. If we focus that lighting, that may deal with some of their issues. But again, it has to be doing with being a better community member, I agree, and not necessarily just a good neighbor, but we are a neighbor to the entire community.
Thank you. Okay, Jean, I think this is going to be... Oh,
Do I get to respond to it?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Did I not let you go? Please. I'm sorry. Please go.
Listen, there's two pieces to this that I'd like to address. One is the ambient light. Yes, the lights are being changed. We're actually in the midst of discussions with Habitat because they're going to be building 3 homes right behind the jail. And so they have shared with us some of their plans so that we can address the lighting issue. And I have been communicating back and forth with some of the neighbors. And the idea is our electrician is working with a specialist right now to fix the lighting problem on the perimeter, or at least adjust it enough so that it can be resolved, so that the neighbors can be happy. I also invited the neighbors in from down on Grove Street and had great discussions with them, and they have become very, very friendly to us, and they actually go over to the Bridge to the Future house and have had picnics and cookouts.
Thank you. Okay, now, Jean, the last question, please.
That's good, because we're running out. How does experience factor into the office of sheriff?
Mr. Kaling, would you start with that?
Well, I think the 40 years that I've worked for Hampshire County and my 6 years in the National Guard gives me a good perspective on what this community is all about. This is a very welcoming community, and we open our arms to those people who are down in their luck, and so I view that as a very positive for this community. And for me personally, I was welcomed in here when I was 10 years old, and I have progressed very well. And so those experiences I use in my everyday ability to try to be kind to people and try to do the right thing for people, because that's what we're supposed to do as public servants.
Thank you. Ms. Sepita.
I think experiences can be varied and you can still be successful. I certainly have the least amount of experience on this panel, in large part I think due to my age as well. You can't make that up. I have experience within this facility, a decade of it, day to day, face to face with the staff, the individuals, and the internal runnings of the facility. I have experience in other facilities doing this same work, seeing how other facilities operate, how other people do it, how other administrators function. I have experience in this community. I'm a lifelong member of this community. I was born and raised in Ware. I live in South Hadley with my family now. I served on the Conservation Commission in Pelham when I was in graduate school at UMass. I'm a product of this community as well. This community has shaped who I am, and my experiences in this community have made me who I am, and I'm proud of that. I'd like to bring that into this office.
Thank you. Ms. Gitelson.
Yes. And I think among the three of us, I probably have the most varied level of experience. I am a former K-12 educator. I'm a former entrepreneur. I have worked at the Hampshire County Jail as the education coordinator, where I've brought academic programs, vocational programs, and college programs to the facility. And now I have statewide experience where I get to work with sheriffs around the state, as well as the DOC state prison system and the Department of Youth Services. So I have a very varied skill set. I was born and raised in New York. I lived for a significant amount of time in California, and I have chosen Hampshire County as my home for the last 30 years, where I truly love it and embrace everything about it. And I think that that varied skill set is exactly why I am the right candidate for this position. We need to think differently about corrections. We need to think in a very different direction. That's what everybody tells us, and I think I've got that.
Thank you. Okay, it's now time for the candidates' closing remarks. Timers, could you give them 90 seconds each? Can you set them for 90 seconds each? We'll give you a little extra time here. When they're ready, are you ready? Ms. Gitelson, will you start, please?
Sure. Thank you, League of Women Voters and the Gazette, for this incredible opportunity to share all of our ideas and visions and experiences in this campaign. And thank you, voters, for coming out tonight. I appreciate your time and your attention. I hope we will take the ACLU's Know Your Sheriff campaign to heart and understand that this is a position that can have a lot of positive local influence if properly administered. I'm the Goldilocks candidate. I have both recent frontlines experience and current administrative and managerial experience at the Hampshire County Jail and now around the state. I already know most of the other sheriffs I'll be joining, and I get along with the Republican ones as well as the Democrats. The Republicans are actually a little more colorful, kind of more fun to talk to be honest, unfortunately. I have a recent master's in leadership and management, where I took courses in leading the change process, strategies for effective leadership, managing human resources and budgets, law for administrators, and more. I was chosen by the president and the faculty to receive the Graduate Student Leadership Award. I am a leader. We need to think differently about corrections for those in custody, for the staff who do this very difficult work, and for our community. Choosing the same thing and expecting a different outcome isn't enough this time. When we know better, we choose better. Thank you.
Mr. Kaling?
Yes, thank you all for coming out, and thank you for listening to us. As I said, I am the Sheriff of Hampshire County. I have education, training, and I have certifications to be the sheriff. I'm the only person sitting here who is in this race, and is in this race for the reasons as possible. For me, the 150 staff that we manage are important, whether it's a correctional officer or the director of treatment or the director of medical or the nurse. All of these people, the maintenance staff, they are all important people. They become the team that you build to make sure that everybody else is safe. Now, it is a difficult task because, as anybody would know, we're in a situation where the outside world, we can't find employment. We can't find employees. The unemployment rate is way down. So we're having the same difficulty as everybody else. So I know how to manage a multifaceted criminal justice agency. I'm hoping that the citizens understand it and recognize the hard work that I had to do for the last half of the past 6 years. I'm asking for your vote on September 6th, or on this weekend if you start to vote early. I want to continue to do the progressive work and moving this system more out into the community than it already is. So thank you.
And Ms. Sepita.
Elected officials should be held to the highest standard. The accountability to the electorate, particularly in this race, is of the utmost importance. It became abundantly clear to the public this week what staff and incarcerated individuals at the Hampshire County Sheriff's Office have long known, that the upper administration feels like they are above the law. They rule with fear and an iron fist. Scare tactics and blatant acts of intimidation of staff in the name of loyalty reign supreme. We talk often of demoralized staff and low morale and the root cause of it. That was laid bare this week when we saw that the facility deputy superintendent in charge of the day-to-day operations of the facility, spying and documenting the political loyalty of staff that is under the current sheriff. This affects careers, families, morale, and livelihoods. And then she continues to come to work each day, continuing to supervise staff, the same staff she spies upon. And the sheriff says he'll do an external investigation. When? After September 6th? Who will do this investigation? The district attorney's office? District attorney, he donates to his campaign. Do not be fooled by a kangaroo court masquerading as justice. What the facility and county need is a clean slate, a fresh voice, a fresh vision, and fresh ideas, specific plans, timelines, the decision-making nature to get it done. What we need is a change in office. I hope I'm that change.
Thank you. Let's thank our candidates for giving us their time this evening. I'd also like to thank the panelists and the Northampton Center for the Arts for the use of this facility.
Thank you, everyone, for the great questions.
Thank you, folks, for coming.
Remember that the last day to register to vote or to change your party affiliation is Saturday. Early in-person voting starts on Saturday. And Election Day is September 6th. Thank you and good night.